Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining and welcome to another session of our Day One and Beyond series, where we take you through various topics and activities related to building out on Oracle Cloud. Today's session is deploying reference architectures in Oracle Cloud, where you will learn how to deploy reference architecture build from start to finish, observing the OCI best practices and cloud adoption framework along the way. This session is being recorded and you'll be able to find the recording on Cloud Customer Connect. You can also find the recordings and slide deck PDFs of our previous sessions there. I'm Renu Bhatt, Program Lead with the Customer Enablement team. And today I'm joined by Anand Prasad, Cloud Architect, and Lynn Lewis, Senior Cloud Engineer, as the main presenters. Joining us as an expert today is Jason Cook, Master Principal Cloud Architect here at Oracle. Welcome everyone to this session. And with that, I'll hand it over to Anand.
Thank you, Renu. I'm very excited to deliver the session. Reference architecture is a very interesting topic. And one of the things which we want to spend next 60 minutes is on, deploying reference architectures. We're going to go into zeroing in on one of the reference architectures. And we're going to show you the little bit about what are the other architectures which has been used and very popularly used in industry. And what are the best practices? And then finally, we'll close with the key takeaways, and then we'll show you a console demo as well. Now, when you walk out of this session, the expectation from Oracle point of view is you will get to know what are the benefits from a reference architecture, how OCI provides you the different capabilities and tooling to support the reference architectures. My colleague Lynn is going to walk you through how the automation tools can be used to deploy the reference architecture, and how we recommend you to use certain tools to deploy reference architectures. And last but the least, I think we'll talk about what are the tools in general you can leverage to deploy the reference architecture as well. One of the most commonly used architecture, whether it's a cloud on-prem world, it's been the most popular is the three-tier architecture. Why it is most popular being a three-tier architecture is, for most of you as you know, it provides a lot more flexibility at each tier. As you can see, the presentation tier, in good olden days, we never had anything on the mobile, right? We used to use the web came first. Before that, it was a client two-tier architecture, client and the server. Be it whatever it is, each tier gives you a lot more flexibility. The presentation layer gives you a lot more flexibility to provide it to multiple channels. The middle tier, or we call it an application tier or a business tier, provides you a lot more capabilities to provide you from processing side of the things, APIs driven architectures, and et cetera, et cetera. The last but the least layer, which is the very secure and a confidential layer, which we all want to protect, it is the data layer. Right now, every company is going into a data-driven company, and then we want to protect the data layer, and that forms the three-tier architecture. Now, why three-tier? What are the things which is a big thing about a three-tier, right? So I'm going to talk about there are many, many benefits. I'm going to only dive into most important benefits. Is the scalability is one. When it comes in, depending upon which number of users, you can scale the tiers independently. You can scale the presentation tier, you can scale the processing tier, which is the application tier, you can scale it up at the data tier. It gives you a lot more flexibility to scale up and scale down at each tier. The second thing is the security. The big thing is the security. Making the tiers, you can completely ward off the access privileges, everything to each tier, and then make sure the attack perimeter from the external world as well as the internal world from a segmentation perspective gives you a lot more flexibility on the security perspective. Last but the least, the reusable and maintenance becomes easier from each tier perspective. You can have multiple presentation tier, but a single middle tier, right? You can reuse for all the presentation tier and for the API layers and all those things. Reuse and maintenance is another big thing in the three-tier architecture, which you can take advantage of it for a number of reasons. Now, before I go in and talk about how OCI supports reference architecture, I want to bring in Jason, who is my colleague who has been working with different industries. And I want him to comment on how Oracle supports and helps deploying reference architectures for different industries. Jason?
Yeah, what's changed in the past, 5 years that I think is notable for architects working in cloud is we've got a wide range of architectural patterns. They're based off of years of experience. They're based off your feedback. And so we've got in Oracle the Architectural Center where you can go to find all these best practices. You don't have to, create the architectural design all by yourself by default. We've got what we call the MAA, or the maximum availability architecture, that provides our best practices and how you deploy things like the Oracle database and Exadata. And these are really good resources that have been developed over time to give you the best practices for achieving things like high availability and DR. And customers should absolutely leverage those to make sure that as they're deploying something on OCI, they're really, using all that knowledge, all the feedback from other customers that they provided us to get the absolutely best design for their environment. But, one of the things I see in the customers I cover, and I cover a lot of retail customers, is the hot topic here lately is how do I make sure my environment's highly available? And foundationally, that topic usually starts with understanding how to leverage our global infrastructure. And what I mean by that is, where do you deploy your workloads from a region standpoint? Usually try to deploy it close to customers to give them maximum performance, but you also use our regions to provide things like an active design or a active passive for your disaster recovery. How do you use our availability domains? If you haven't ever heard of those, think of those like data centers. Again, that helps kind of drive in how you can have a highly available solution, right? How to use fault domains, which is a smaller subset and does some other high availability things. You need to understand as architects things like automated failover, how to use Oracle Data Guard or fast failover so that if there's a kind of a component or hardware issue, that your workload's going to automatically fail over and still have the uptime you're shooting for. And of course, auto scaling has been a topic forever in the cloud, is how to use things like instance pools. So as your demand changes over time, or you have something that's spiky, like, it's Black Friday and holiday sales, how do you make sure that the design you put in place scales appropriately to meet those kind of needs? And I think all those are very important as architects, that we understand those and you understand how to talk to your customers about it so they can achieve whatever performance, whatever availability targets they're trying to achieve with that workload that they're going to host in the cloud. And I'll put some of these links in here around the Architectural Center or the MAA if you haven't heard about those. But to me, that's where the industry has gone. Reusable best practices, lots of customer feedback to build them. And as architects, I think it's our job to make sure that we're very familiar with them to make sure our customers can hit their targets.
Perfect. Thank you, Jason. That was very informative. Folks, if you have any type of questions, like, you wanted for your particular industry, please post it to the Q&A. Jason is here to answer those. Like, one of the things what I want to take it to the next sessions is, like, we understand that all of you are from different industries. You have a different requirements. You want to deploy your workload in a particular way. We talked about retail, but if you are from a different industries, please do ask those questions. We can answer them, provide them references to our documentation and from an Oracle standpoint of view. But I'm going to cover something which is very interesting and which is very popularly used, like, from a reference architecture perspective, is using a pet store application. Most of us have dealt with buying online, right? One way or the other, whether it is pet store application, anything which you want to buy it online, it's a 3-tier architecture. And the classic use case here is like, we all have pets. Like, I've been a big fan of pets. I have a golden doodle at my house. I regularly buy on the Chevy.com, which is a very popular pet store application site. And then when I go in there, and what is the thing which is built behind the screen to support the customers like me is what I'm going to spend a little bit of time in talking about, what we call it a Muse shop. Okay. If you look at it from an architecture standpoint of view, what are the three considerations when we design this Muse shop application? First thing is networking for segmentation. It's also provides a little bit of, like, security, and security for access is the second one. And the application itself, right? These are the three considerations when we designed it. The segmentation provides you so that you can make sure who has an access to what, where is the incoming request is, how do you block the request which is not needed, and all those things. from the security perspective, like how can you take advantage of the access layer, who has an access to this application, and application itself, like, what are the things which the application provides you from the functionality perspective. Now, I'm going to show you the architecture, and then I'm going to walk in through it from a cooking standpoint of view. How did we build this pet store application? And then I'm going to request my colleague Lynn to come in and really talk about this application deploying into the OCI and showcase how easy to architect an application, deploy the application from in the OCI, and what are the capabilities OCI provides it. Now, taking a look at the architecture, if you look at it, it's a very, very simple 3-tier architecture. Although the database layer is at the bottommost layer, we use autonomous database. And if you look at the front end, the layer is the load balancer, right? We provide the load balancer in the public subnet. The application layer is in the private subnet. And the reason you can think about it, why we have made it a private subnet for the application layer, we highly encourage every one of you to design more private subnets unless and absolutely it is required to be front-ended and accessible from internet, right? Private subnet provides you a lot more from a security perspective. The incoming request is completely blocked off. There's no internet connection to the external world, and you have only one-way connectivity from your private subnet to the external world to download the patches and et cetera, et cetera. This is more preferred from a security point of view, from you have like an attack perimeter reduced completely, and then so that you can make sure you can audit who comes into the private subnet. So I'm going to talk about a little bit on the database side also, the application layer, how we built it. Now let me walk you through a step-by-step process about how did we design this, how did we build this from the ground up. When you go walk into the OCI, the first thing you choose is you start creating a network segmentation. You choose a region, and within a region, you choose a VCN. And a VCN is nothing but a software-defined networking, and its full form is Virtual Cloud Network. And Virtual Cloud Network provides you a network segmentation, and it is a regional construct. Means if a region has 3 or more availability or 2 or more availability domains, you can go across the region and then create the VCN. The next thing you do is subnet. Oracle also provides you a regional subnets now, so that you can go across the region. So basically, you can go across the 2 availability domains in this example. I created a public subnet right now, and I brought in the load balancer as the first thing to be hit from an end users who are accessing my application. The next thing I'm going to build is a private subnet where I want to deploy my middle tier. And as you can see, there is a CIDR blocks also shown in the 2 subnets. In the top subnet, I'm using /24s. I don't need /24s because it's the load balance is the only one which I've deployed it. You can reduce it and go up to /28s or even /30 because the number of IP addresses I'm going to use is very less. And depending upon your requirements in the middle tier or the application tier, you can also readjust the CIDR blocks. In the application layer, I have deployed 2 of my applications there, which is connected to the load balancer. And then the last but the least, I'm going to bring in the database tier, right? In this case, the database tier is the autonomous database, which is the industry leading database, which is servicing this application, okay? Overall, if you look at it, I choose a region, created this software-defined networking, created this, inside that I created the subnets to segment the networking, and then started deploying the software components into that, okay? Now, one of the things then, once everything is done, I provided the internet gateway access to the public subnet, and I had the users connect to the load balancers to access the application, okay? And then I also configured my private subnet to go to the external world, one-way traffic to the NAT gateway to the external world, so that they can download any patches or anything from the internet. It's a direction of communication is one way from the subnet to the external world, and nothing from an external world into the subnet. And the other thing which I attached it to the database tier is the service gateway. I need to spend a little bit on the service gateway. This is one of the key offering from Oracle. What it provides you is, it's a classic use case is database backups are done on a frequent basis, like an hourly, depending upon your business requirements, like daily basis, weekly basis, etc. You do not want your backups to go over the internet. And a standard practice is to back up our database backup to an object storage. And what Oracle provides you a capability is a service gateway, which nothing but you can tie it up to a subnet, and then service gateway allows you to go your backup over the Oracle backbone to the Oracle public services. Okay. The service gateway is nothing but ties up your subnet to access public services from Oracle over the Oracle backbone. And this is very secure so that you don't go over the internet and everything is going over the Oracle backbone, less risky and more secure. Okay. Now, if you look at it, I'm talking about the benefits as and when I'm going about less risky, more secure. And these are the key words, like, your CISO in your company is very, very happy to hear about it, right? Now, as a security guy, he wants to see everything less risky, more compliant, so that he can be at rest when we design these architectures. Now, what are the other things that you consider from a reference architectures? I want to summarize it and then provide you the pros and cons, and then bring in Lynn to talk about, like, some of the things which I showed you. How can you use automation and how can you deploy that into the OCI? Okay. Now, the best practices, right? Like, what we recommend from an Oracle standpoint of view is always use regional subnets, because it allows you to, like, for whether it's high availability use case, disaster recovery use case, you can deploy it into different availability domains. The next thing is the network security group. I didn't talk about the security side from an access point of view. The network security group is the capability OCI offers you to control at a VNIC level. We also do offer the security list, which provides you a broad-based control at the subnet level, whereas the network security group provides you the control at the VNIC level. Now, the other thing is, like, the next two is, like, you use the CIDR blocks, as well as you control the traffic flow from the designing the traffic, incoming traffic. You can all certainly do that. We use it in security list and in combination with the network security groups. We generally recommend use the network security group within the VCN to control the east-west traffic. Use the firewalls, whether it is Palo Alto, Cisco firewalls, to control the traffic north-south. Now, since I deployed a 3-tier architecture, I'm not saying everything is very positive about 3-tier architecture. There are certain pros and there are certain cons. I'm definitely going to quickly touch upon the pros, because I talked about it. Scalability is one, like, provides the security from a segmentation perspective. You can control the traffic coming in from the data tier. You control who can access the data tier. It's only the application tier can access, and no more access provided, so that the segmentation and the security is very, very well defined. And from on the cons perspective, it's more complex, right? You have to monitor the each tiers. If there is no persistent connection, definitely increase traffic across the 3 tiers, like you're going in from data tier, from the middle tier to data tier, from a presentation tier to the middle tier. So there are some cons, but I think the advantages it provides it, a lot more industries are using 3-tier architecture. And then I think this is a most commonly used architecture across many, many industries. I'll stop here. And then what I'm going to hand over to Lynn while he sets up, I would like the audience to think about it from what the existing architectures they're using at their company, and start posing us some questions in the thing, like, what do they need and how can Oracle help them in achieving this deployment architectures? Like, if they have, like, a particular use case, we can certainly be happy to answer them. Lynn?
Thank you, Anand. So you see, this is the full architecture that we're going to be talking about throughout the demo. And I'm going to be going back and forth between Oracle's UI and some other web pages. So let's first look at, since Anand mentioned automation, you can go to Oracle's examples, which are public, open source at Oracle, and this is on GitHub. And so you can see here You can have different types of projects. Different type of communities are here. MySQL examples are here. OpenJDK is here. Oracle developer code and examples, tutorials are here as well for writing codes. Your Terraform modules are here. So this is where you would have the full configuration if you wanted to of a full configuration of a tenancy. You could put everything together. Everything that you can do through a UI, you can do with Terraform and Terraform modules. And here's several automated deployments. They're already available for you in that. So this goes through the different capabilities that are available, Marketplace and Quick Start, Marketplace stack schema, and best practices are listed there as well. So all of this is things that you might want to think about and work through as a start in your process. All right. You can also see the Terraform modules I mentioned, the Quick Start I mentioned, and also Verrazano is also an open source enterprise container platform. So if you're looking at developing cloud native, everything that we're going to show could also be done in microservices using containers and managed by Verrazano or Kubernetes, whichever you choose. So given this structure that we see here, where you have a two backends or two servers, a load balancer, an autonomous database, you have a virtual cloud network across two domains, and you have object storage. So let's see where you would start. You can't do anything without first hanging it on something, right? So key to anything you do in any cloud is a software-defined network. That's what we refer to as a virtual cloud network. Our location here. So now I'm in Oracle Cloud. We go to this particular example, just a simple virtual cloud network. Details are simply that you have a public subnet and a private subnet, particular CIDR blocks, route tables that are set in place. There's one internet gateway. There's one network security groups, which is essential. If you're going to be using an autonomous database, it's a requirement to set the thing up. So those were the types of things you need to think about as you go through. And then in this case, I have a NAT gateway and a service gateway to get to background storage, and NAT gateway to get updates and that type of thing. And I can talk directly to the internet as well through the internet gateway. So this looks very close to the example that was shown by Anand. So the next thing you would do is go ahead and put together the instances, because the third thing you're going to do is the load balancer. Before you can do the load balancer, you have to do the instances. So I've already started 2 instances here. They're ARM. A1 Flex is an ARM. They've got 8 threads each and 24 gigabytes of memory each. So pretty beefy and systems overall. And again, remember OCPU in Oracle speak is 2 threads. So that's why I said with 4, it's actually 8 threads. Yeah, so if you want to take a look at either one of these, they pretty straightforward again to start and stop, to work through. You can see that it's on the virtual cloud network I mentioned. I'm running Linux 8 on both of them. And anything really interesting here? Let's see. See, I just started this before the demonstration, so there's not much in the metrics to look at. This is where I would also be able to create a custom image from this image. I could create an instant configuration. I could have troubleshoot, that type of thing, all from these additional actions. So activate the cloud agent, those types of things, shielded instance. We've got the virtual cloud network. We've got the action tier in the background. The next thing is to look at the load balancer. So then you go to, again, under the virtual cloud network, networking. Yeah, you'd have the load balancers. So, and this is a discussion as Anand said, you're looking for one that's going to do the load balancing internal, east-west, not north-south. And the idea is that you can set these things up the way you need to look them. This would be a load balancer as opposed to a network load balancer. It basically, you're going to name it. You're going to, usually it's going to be public. You're going to give it an ephemeral IP address. You're going to, this time we're going to do it at the very minimum and select the cloud, virtual cloud network. Select the subnet. I'm going to go with a public subnet. Notice that it's recommended. Now you see why I had to already start the instances, because I have to decide how it's going to work through the, in this case, I've just selected round robin, or it's given a default round robin HTTP. Just straight up, very simple approach. And then the certificate in place, enable the logs, put the errors in place. Default group. And it'll identify you if you don't give it the right thing. So it's setting this up. Notice it's already showing some errors. That's okay. You go back and go to a smart check and figure out what the problem is. But so now you've got the networking set up. You've got the load balancer in place. You've got the virtual machines up and running. And so now you go in and you set up the autonomous transaction processing machine, which should be in place. It takes a while, so I already set it up for you or set it up in place. A while, 3 minutes, but that's forever in a demo. And then you go through the database connection. In this case, you'd probably select something like transaction processing, or if you were doing more transaction urgent, so that you were able to make sure that you were getting all your connections in place. And it would create an instant wallet for you, and you download the wallet and put that in place, and you'd be good to go. So again, the idea is that you created this. We showed you had the load balancer that was talking on a public subnet. I had everything on a public subnet, but this was in place for you. And then you have autonomous database, in this case, running a transaction processing. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Anand. He'll walk through some alternatives.
So the some of the other things which we can think about it from the architecture perspective is, now I think gone are the days like everybody is moving from on-prem days, but they're already in the cloud, and then you want to innovate in the cloud. Like, what are those applications? We call them as a cloud native applications. Like, you're in the cloud, now you want to bring in a new application or build a new application. And this is one of the example of a cloud native application, which consists of a microservices architecture, where whether it's a container based architecture, and then you can see that in a container based architecture, how we purport a container based architecture as well. And where with the Kubernetes as well as the Docker containers deployed into the OCI. And of course, I think we still do support two-tier architectures. If there is only the presentation tier as well as the data tier, we do support the two-tier architecture as well. Like, the original client server architecture still gets supported. If you have an application which you want to migrate to OCI with the only 2 tiers, although we highly encourage you to make it 3 tiers, because that gives you a lot more flexibility from a security perspective, and also gives you a lot more advantages from networking side as well as scalability perspectives. But if you still want to retain a 2-tier architecture, OCI does support 2-tier architectures as well. Well, I think in terms of like, there are a lot of companies are moving towards NTS, like, in this, like, servicing customers at complex applications. OCI does provide you like, N-tier architecture as well. You can have number of layers of like, front tier, presentation tiers, number of layers in the application tier, and of course, like, in the database tier as well. So you can have the many layers in the architectures, and you can have each tier service certain type of applications, certain type of business logic, certain type of like, activities. We do support N-tier architecture. Like, many of the applications right now, or if they are more complex, they are more than 3 tiers. And we do understand that. And then we do support the capabilities from an OCI perspective. Last but the least, I think just to give close it, and what are the key takeaways from using the 3-tier architecture, as I mentioned about, definitely for the scalability, provides you a lot more segmentation from a security perspective, and then reuse and maintenance is one of the biggest consideration you want to use the 3-tier architecture. Like, you can also use OCI provides you a lot more automation tools for you to deploy this 3-tier architectures. As Jason was talking about architecture center, there's a lot of architecture centers contains Terraform code, which you can use to deploy using the resource manager, and the architecture centers provides you the advantage for you to take a look at it. Now, one thing which I want to mention in the opportunity here is, like, each of these architectures which Oracle recommends is to provide you an head start, right? What do I mean by head start is, instead of going to a drawing board and start from ground zero, like, we have already provided you something to uptake it, like, at 70 to 80%. And then you can definitely customize to your business needs, like, and change it and make it like, make changes, modify it, and deploy it to needs your business needs. Okay. But definitely, I think Oracle provides you this architecture center for you to download the reference architectures as well as use it, the automation tool. We have talked about the resource manager in earlier as well. Just to touch upon the resource manager, one of the things this tool provides you is the flexibility is, it's nothing but a Terraform as a service. It takes care of a lot of the pain points which you use Terraform as a standalone, but it gives you a lot more flexibility. I highly encourage you to try out Resource Manager, download an architecture artifact from an architecture center, use the Resource Manager to deploy to OCI. Okay. With that, I think, Len, you want to
I
talk
just
about?
I just wanted to add that you don't have to deploy it. You can just look through the plan, and it will when you send a plan in there, you can, number one, it won't necessarily do anything until you hit apply, but it will say all the different resources it will touch. So it's sort of like you can see what you're going to do before you actually do it. And so it's not until you do it, when you apply, does it actually execute and start building out the resources as described. And as I was showing you different websites here. This one is the resource, the architecture center, and you can see that we have about 440 architectures, reference architectures, about 240 or 250 solution playbooks, which a whole series of acts that can take place, and all these are available with you online, just as your capability that we have here on Oracle's quick start in GitHub in place. So yeah. So
hey guys, there was a question out there that at the very beginning of the session, I think it's from Nippon, that wanted to know about how can we implement best practices from Gen 1 to Gen 2. You okay if I dive into that one real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. It's a pretty wide topic there, right? So I'm going to talk generally and then give some guidance how to make it more specific. I mean, generally the difference between Gen 1, also used to call Classic, and Gen 2 is significant in 2-3 areas. And probably the most important one that I'd start with, because we could spend the whole day on this, is around workload isolation, right? In Gen 2, one of the things that got introduced that allowed you to isolate workloads and protect them, kind of like blast radius isolation and making sure groups couldn't affect each other, were compartments, right? And what compartments are just logical containers to put resources like servers and storage and databases in, so that you can isolate them from prod, dev, test, sandbox, right? You can build out compartments that way. But you can also isolate your business lines, right? The finance people can build their own servers, but they can't terminate a server for HR, right? So that is just one example of big difference between Gen 1 and Gen 2 that you definitely want to know as you're thinking about best practices is you want to look at compartments. You want to understand how you can use those to grant access with IAM and how you can isolate things from getting blown up. Broadly, it's a big question, and I generally recommend teams to make sure you engage your Oracle account teams so that we're answering your specific question and we can dive deeper into maybe probably an area that you're more specifically concerned about. There are migration documents out there, how to migrate from Gen 1 to Gen 2. But if you're looking for just best practices, definitely get a hold of your account team. They could probably answer the specific question that was behind that, what you put out there in the Q&A.
Jason, there was another question on tools for creating and editing the architecture diagrams. So do you want to talk about OKit a bit?
Ooh, that gets you into the architecture battle of your favorite tool of choice, oftentimes. The architecture diagrams that we have out there in the center are going to be in a couple different formats. Some of them are just in PowerPoint, right? And whatever your tool is, I won't get into that, but most of ours are going to be in Draw.io, PowerPoint, a little bit of Visio, as we're going to see a lot of our diagrams. They all work fine. We also have all the architecture icon sets out there. If you're trying to make sure they're a little more pretty, you'll see, a download for OCA architectural icons. But as for toolage, use whatever you're familiar with as an architect.
Awesome. And then there's one more question. Are there PeopleSoft certified reference architectures in GitHub?
PeopleSoft in general does have a whole set of tools. They did their, so you can see this is the Oracle's Architecture Center, and you can see that there's actually a link to PeopleSoft Common and PeopleSoft Interaction Hub. And when I did PeopleSoft here, you can see that there's a number of deployed this is a reference architects deploy Oracle PeopleSoft applications to the cloud. So I would work with your PeopleSoft folks. They actually have a whole series of tools for each of the different embedded processes in PeopleSoft, so they can be some of those have been turned into open tools and some of them have not. For GitHub, it's pretty easy, just github.com, Oracle / this shows the quick start guide. From there, you can get to any of the other as well.
Ooh, there's a good one in there. Can we test any of these in Oracle Cloud Always Free Labs? Yeah, there's two things. So the MuShop Lab is I put a link out there earlier. We can put it out there again if we need to. But the MuShop Lab, you can actually run that entire thing for free in an Oracle free account. Okay, so if you want to run through that whole thing and it'll give you step by step, there's a really good learning guide out there that even if you know very little about OCI, it'll walk you through every single step and it'll teach you some things along the way. With another way you can do that is we've also got Live Labs, Oracle Live Labs. Some of those require you to have a free account. Some of the newer ones will actually run in a tenancy we spin up for you, which is even easier because you don't have to have an account at all. And so I definitely look at, getting your own free account so you can do stuff like MuShop on your own and go, start to finish and learn about all these concepts. And also look at the newer offerings from Live Labs, and some of the older ones, because some of the newer offerings from Live Labs do a great job of letting you spin things up with little to no work on your end for prep.
And mentioning that, the always free, of course, there are specific instances, including autonomous instances, that are always free forever. But you also get a $300 worth of credits, which actually, because of the discounts, it ends up to be about $1,000 worth of credits for 30 days. So I would go ahead and look at some other things that I was interested in beyond MuShop, which is very tiny, and look at some other things that you might want to examine and work with that would take more credits than the always free.
Yeah. We see there is this is where answering live serverless way to deploy things like MuShop. Yeah. It kind of depends on how tightly you define serverless, but if you're looking for, I don't want to spin up any Linux servers, right? I want to use things like Kubernetes. I want to use load balancers that Oracle manages, and I just have to configure object storage, right? A lot of what we would sometimes call serverless or PaaS services. yes, MuShop is absolutely set up that you can deploy it using Kubernetes and PaaS-like services to give you a full serverless design and deployment pattern.
Jason, you were talking about some industry example in the beginning of the session. You want to talk a little more about that, or?
Yeah, I mean, the thing I would maybe just put a capstone on that is one of the things as architects, or if you're a customer and you've got an architect, you definitely want to talk, before you get the deployment out, is things like, what are my uptime requirements? What kind of HA am I looking for? Do I need my app to be up, 9 a.m. 995, right? That gets into services that you need to consider. Services like, do I need to go active across regions? Do we need to have, my application server in 2 different availability domains, my database in 2 different availability domains, and your DR needs? These have been like the 2 active conversations I've had with customers lately is, what do you want for HA? How available does it need to be? And then as architects, what are the services that allow you to have the uptime that you're looking for using our global infrastructure? And as much as possible, more of those serverless services, because those generally have very high uptime versus, spinning up your own server on Linux or Windows. And then DR, right? Bad things happen, right? Natural events, human-caused events. Things fail on all cloud data center providers, right? So you need to talk with your architects and your customers about when if I have a server that completely fails, do I have automatic failover? If an entire region goes out, hurricane, flood, fires, do I need to be able to run in another region? And how does that work? These are all really important conversations from an HA and DR standpoint before you go and deploy workload in production. Certainly things you could probably get away with before you get there. But for the area I cover, which is retail, your e-commerce site probably should be something that's active, right? When it's down, it's probably pretty easy to figure out how much sales are going to lose per hour. You've probably got line of business apps that take care of your warehouse, right? Things that pull product off a shelf, put a label on it, shove it in a box, and put it on a truck. Those things probably need to be somewhat highly available, right? You don't lose sales immediately, but if it's down and you've got people sitting on the floor and they're not being able to pack and things are, backing up, you could have 10, 20, 100,000 packages backed up within minutes. And then you've got legacy stuff that you may not have to have those same availability requirements in DR. But those are things definitely you want to be talking about. You want to be pushing your cloud COE teams, your server guys, your database guys, and having questions of how available they need to be and what would happen if something failed. How can I fail over somewhere else?
Hope everyone got to learn something new today. Our next session will be on August 7th, where you'll learn about Oracle Modern Data Platform and how it simplifies end-to-end lifecycle and delivers faster time to insights. Please register for this session to learn how to gain control over your data with a single platform to collect, curate, and manage all your transactional, warehouse, analytical, and AI/ML assets. With that, thank you again, all of you, for joining us. See you all next time. Have a great day, everyone.